So Jennifer and I had a conversation about women in Kuwait and how women find and navigate power in those systems. So can you just tell us a little bit about what the climate of recovery is like for women in Kuwait?
Hi, I'm Jennifer and I'm an addict. And thank you all for your service and thank you for being here. Um, Life has changed a lot in Kuwait over the last 17 years that I've been here. And when I first came, there was really no support for women at all. I tried to go into the meetings, but I wasn't welcomed. It was the first time I wasn't really welcomed into an NA meeting. And they have their own reasons. But over the last, I'd say 5 years, it's changed dramatically. What we have now is when I came, there was no English speaking meeting. There were no women's meetings. There was just an Arabic group. And I started an English speaking meeting with a couple of other fellows, and but it was off and on. It was sometimes no one would show up, and if we traveled, no one would be there. And the meeting that I started is the Hope Group, and my premise for starting it was that it would all be, like anybody could come, you'd share in any language, it was open, it was an open meeting. But it didn't really work out that way. It's not how things don't work how you plan. And eventually when we had, when our membership started to climb and we had quite a few English speakers coming in, and we had a change when the women started to come in more from the treatment end of it, but there wasn't a real push for meeting attendance. And there were some other women from outside of Kuwait who would come in, but they weren't always coming. And the married women were less likely to share in meetings, and they didn't really feel like they had that the women's a safe place for women. We had a few women who were multicultural that bridged the gap between the Hope Group and then the Arabic speaking side. And the message became very clear that you can't get out of treatment and just, like go on with, yeah, I'm fixed, so that aftercare, that space that Narcotics Anonymous seems to fill here is that afterwards. But they started to get a very positive outlook on NA in the treatment center. Most of them would come from that venue. And there was a real push, you gotta go to meetings, go to meetings. And yeah, about 4 or 5 years ago, the Hope Group grew tremendously, to 25, which is good for us. And the women felt very safe in our room. It's a candlelight meeting, but I'm like the mother hen, so I put up more lights. I didn't feel comfortable having it so dark in the room. And, we've had our share of problems and everything, like navigating how to balance it out. But I will say that when I used to be the only woman in a meeting, it became that I was like one of 15 women in the meeting. Some nights there were more women in the Hope Group meeting than there were men. And women would actually share first. Instead of, self-silencing, they would actually share about what was going on in general ways. And so today, I do not go to the Arabic women's meetings because I just don't understand anything. And but I do sponsor women whose first language is Arabic. And actually, all of my sponsees are mixed language speakers. And they do go to the women's groups, and they find a tremendous fellowship there. I think they have 7 meetings a week in Arabic, but if anybody wants to know, I can get you in touch with somebody who can tell you more about the women's Arabic meetings. But
So
what I,
Jennifer,
yeah,
I
go ahead.
just yeah, I just wanted to interject for a second because I know one of the things that we talked about was the massive spectrum of modesty in that culture. Like I
Mhm.
think over here in the United States, we maybe have one vision about what it's like for women in Kuwait.
Yeah,
And I know that it's different in Iran and some of the other countries. So maybe you could talk a
yes.
little bit about that spectrum and then also just how that impacts the third tradition and the marginalization of women over there in Kuwait.
Sure. One, we have, just like in any culture, there's a gamut of modesty. And even in men, some men like to cover and some men don't. But of course, we have culture and religion, and they sort of mix together. For myself, I can get away with a little bit less modest appearance. And I just realized how dark it is, and I know we have time constraints. So, but we don't. I don't really see a lot of the covered women, but they do go to the meetings outside. The typical covering here is a headscarf. There's also the abaya and everything like that. But then there are Western girls. I've actually had to ask women to self-police in our meetings because we are in a church and it's more of it has a larger Eastern population. And they were coming in quite scantily clad to the church. And I was like, but even it's a church. And so, there tends to be both like scantily clad and like fully covered. But, it's really just about a person. It's personal. It truly is a personal thing, how women feel comfortable in the meetings. And so we haven't had that much of a problem. The issue does go round about sharing. I think the issue is more, I've noticed that married women tend to share less in the mixed meeting, in the English speaking mixed meeting. And I feel that for women's access to meetings, that I don't know how much family support they have. In
Yeah.
general, yeah, in
So
general,
so
here,
we were talking about, I guess, like the culture of self-silencing that happens in the
yes.
mixed meeting with women. And then you also were talking to me a little bit about some of the sponsorship challenges. I know the speaker previous talked about the idea of the reluctance to get female sponsors and the challenges with that. So can you just talk a little bit about the sponsorship challenges for just a minute or two?
Yes, thank you. Um, Traditionally, because the women were going through treatment to get into NA, there were certain men that would go into the treatment center and they would end up sponsoring these women. And as we all know, this can be not a good thing. Now we have to put a layer of culture on it where um, some women are not allowed to sit with men at all. And then other women are like, that's ridiculous. It depends on your family and your culture, where you come from, or if you're mixed heritage or whatnot. And so there's a lot of mixed message. To me, I found it very hypocritical. Like, you have a male sponsor, but you can't sit in a mixed meeting with other women. And for me, the issue is a lot about the fourth and fifth step. And for me, I was trying to understand, how can you really share about your sexual inventory with a man? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I've noticed a lot of times it's to me, remember, I'm an outsider. I'm American. I'm 100% American. I can do the American accent as well, but I'm actually from California. So I'm an outsider. But when I look at it, it breaks not just like an old tradition in NA. The original sponsorship pamphlet said men work with men and women work with women, but it also goes against every cultural norm here. And they said, well, there aren't enough women to sponsor. There aren't enough women to sponsor. And I said, now there are. We've been doing this for years. And I have a couple of sponsees who originally sponsored my men, and the step work is less formal. I prefer to use the step working guide when I work with women. So I always want to be really trepidatious about what I say, because this is my perspective and my experience in NA. But I've always seen that, a lot of these women come in and they're just the most beautiful things. I mean, just drop dead gorgeous girls. And then they get these male sponsors and they don't realize it because the self-esteem. I came in here with zero self-esteem and I didn't think anyone would like me. And I trust these men who sound good. And so it leads to complications. I mean, this is a story as old as time. So, I mean, I don't need to explain it to you guys. And there are some male-female sponsorship relationships that seem to work here. But then for the most part, I think that there is a loss that I know when I got connected with my sponsor and her network, that tree of recovery, my life changed. I became different, not just in NA, but also in my personal life as well. I learned how to have relationships with women and I wasn't sitting around manipulating men. So there's a little personal aspect to that.
Right, right. So, I think the other two issues that we talked about before we move on, we talked about just the idea that the level of stigma with women and addiction in that part of the world is one of the contributing factors. So it's a larger PR issue that women, it would seem, would have to now take on the mantle of public relations to really try to get that larger acceptance in the community at large, and then also to bring other women along, because sometimes I guess you were mentioning how women either are not trusting or not believing because of the patriarchal peer pressure that goes on.
Yeah, I think, again, there's a spectrum to it. Like different families are more open to the idea that women are addicts too. But when I first came, it almost seemed like, well, your addiction isn't as bad because you're a woman. That kind of was like, I felt like that attitude was prevalent. But nowadays we see that everyone's pretty much aware that there's this, there is this definitely, addiction doesn't discriminate, I would say though that there is still this idea that once you do treatment or you do this for a little while, you're better. And if you just get married and have kids and, and just be a good wife and a good mother and go to work, you're cured. But this might also be a perception across the world. Whether or not it's more prominent here, I would, give my time to a gamut of Arab women, not just from Kuwait, but around the world, and not just Muslim Arab women, but Christian Arabs and the whole all the cultural aspects of it. So, but yes, women access to meetings may be limited if they are in conservative families and the family doesn't understand their need to be in the groups post hospitalization.
Okay, so you know what, before we move on to the next speaker, there were a couple of slides that are pictures that you did send me about the fellowship there. So I wanted you to just talk a little bit about some of these images.
Yeah, the first one is a key tag from one of my sponsees. It's the Arabic version of the Narcotics Anonymous key tag. Is that just for today? I'm not sure. Then, yeah. The other one is, I think it might have been my birthday meeting. It was in July, and there was such a great group of people there. We might meet in the Catholic Church. And then the last meeting is a downstairs meeting where this is our Thursday night open discussion meeting. And so it can get a little larger because it's an earlier meeting. So, and this was pre-meeting, someone took a picture of the space for us. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And yeah, these are just some other images. I just wanted to to put up there.
Yeah. Well, you know, because Kuwait is a very modern city, and it's funny because I can go somewhere, I can sit on the private beach in my bikini, and then, you know, I can go south to a more conservative area, and I wouldn't be caught dead unless I was wearing a t-shirt and pants, you know, at least. So it's a huge spectrum. I think just like all cultures. But I would love, I'm really happy we're here, and I love that you guys are interested in what we're doing. And please, anytime, just if you want to message me about coming to our meeting and talking, I'd love that.
Okay.
Thank you so much.